Hi, this is Trey, co-founder of Shirthead Samples, and today we're thrilled to introduce Bel Canto Violin, our new solo violin sample library. The original inspiration for this library was those nostalgic and romantic violin solos from the golden age of cinema. But as we got further into the project, we decided to include a more comprehensive list of articulations, and after many different versions and revisions and multiple recording sessions, we've arrived at this library, which we're super excited about. While we were creating this library, some of the touchstones we really focused on were things like really taking our sampling method up to the next level. As with all of our libraries since Birth of the Trumpet, every note of this library was recorded while our soloist played a massive piece of music that includes all the articulations we want. This is a huge advantage in sampling and allows for much more idiomatic and realistic performances and articulations. We also sampled each string of the violin individually with all the dynamics and articulations and round robins up every individual string, which not only allows for greater timbral options for the end user, they can play the same phrase on different strings, but it allows us to track where we are on every string, which allows for more innovative and groundbreaking legato options. Like, for example, string crossing legato, where we can track which string we're on. There's a different sound, that the violin makes when it's moving from one string to the other that, as of yet, has not really been captured in a sample library. Also, the style of this violin is very much in this bel canto style, which is a slightly older style. Bel canto means beautiful singing, and where there's a tendency to stay on one string a little more, to kind of go up a string rather than crossing strings. So you're hearing more of the shifting. They're kind of leaning into the shift a little bit more. And so we have a new legato type as well called Expressive Shifting, where it's not really a full portamento, like a really milky, long portamento, but just a quick shift where we're hearing them moving from one position of the violin to the other. When we first introduced the concept of smart delay with our Birth of the Trumpet back in 2020, it became the cornerstone of every library we released since then. And while smart delay is a huge part of Bel Canto Violin, and we'll listen to more later in the video, we really focused on the real-time playing of this as well. Just the nature of it being a violin and very expressive, it just felt right to have it really be playable. So a great deal of effort was put into making it inspiring and fulfilling to play in real time. Let's take a look at Bel Canto Violin in real time first. Okay, so here we are in real time. You can see down the right-hand side, you've got a list of all your articulations, and you've got just a couple of essential controls here. We've got our position select, articulations, attacks, and expression. You've got the ever so important real-time smart delay toggle. And then we have our violin here that shows us the positions of where we are. So you can see here we have a position. It's currently set to auto, which is probably going to take care of you for most of what you want to be doing. It just kind of picks the best place to play notes in this bel canto style, which again is going to maybe favor staying on the same string a little more and sliding around. Here in your basic slurred legato articulation, which is kind of the main articulation, especially for being in smart delay, like just playing in the slurred legato, and smart delay will take care of a lot of the key switching. But if we check out playing, so when you're in real time, you do have some advanced controls here, which we'll come back to, but you can set the dynamics to mod wheel or key velocity. When it's set to mod wheel, you just have a lot more control over the performance, so I tend to leave it in mod wheel. So your dynamics are mod wheel. You also have expression here, so you can you have control with the mod wheel dynamically. In the key velocity, when you're set to dynamics being mod wheel, you've got some of those expressive shifts we talked about. If you play really light key velocity, you'll get these shifts. So they're not quite a portamento, just a little shift between positions. And you'll notice that on the violin, if it's possible, it'll try to stay on the same string. So, for example, if I play, well, let's maybe go A. So that I just played that second note with a nice soft velocity. You also have a soft attack if you're not playing a legato note, just the first note of a phrase, and you play a soft note, you get a soft attack. You can see here. It kind of shows you what some special attacks or so there was string X legato, string crossing legato. So that's what we're talking about when you're tracking, moving from string to string. There's some different things that happen in the legato that more accurately represent that. So you know, in the highest velocity, it's really a pretty intense vibrato. I tend to play with it really in the middle of the road and then use the higher velocities for, you know, intense moments. But you leaving it around 50, 60, 70. That's the real kind of sweet spot. And then you have the really delicate stuff down low at the bottom of the velocities. You can always swell and do all that. So that's the slurred legato. And again, when we get to smart delay, there's all kinds of extra stuff that's happening in there. You can also, just to kind of talk about the timbral differences, you know, you can set, if you don't want it jumping around so much and you want it to play a little more, maybe a more modern kind of style, you could leave it in first position or third position or some of these lower ones, and you'll get less... you get a little more kind of straightforward sound, not that really high up the fingerboard, delicate kind of playing. So you can always feel free to change the position, but realize that if you play out of the position, it's not just gonna play nothing. It'll play notes still. So you see it, the auto position changes. So don't worry that you're gonna set the position wrong and not get notes. You'll get notes no matter where you put it. So, but you can also, you know, if you want that kind of open string sound, you'll get these, obviously the G, D, A, and E. You'll get. So you get that more open string sound. So you have a lot of, you know, if we were to think about a note like the A, like this A, you have your open string A. Just kind of real plain, icy kind of sound. And then if we were to go up the violin a little bit, we would get on the D string, just kind of a real sweet A. And then way up high on the G string, this is a real delicate, you know. So you've got, that's a note, that's an example of a note where you have lots of timbral options. You can hear when you're way up on those high positions, there's a lot of bow sound. It's a real delicate and airy kind of sound. So the lower the position is, the less of that you get, and the higher the position, the more of that kind of sound you'll get. So that's the position. You can leave it on auto, or you can leave it on one of these lower positions, and it's going to cover you for most of your basses. In the key area here, you've got all your articulations, which correspond to your articulations there, and display showing them. And you've got attacks here. So some of these, so you can in the same way we can force. We can force that expressive shift. We can use the attacks to change some of these things. They might be more useful when you're in the middle of making a track. You might not use them as much live, but you can see I just pressed that D sharp, that E flat gives you that Portamento slur. So gives you that quick little, without the soft velocity. So that's your articulations into attacks. So going down, and then also your expression here. I'm moving my expression knob on the keyboard, but you can do it here, or you can assign it to something else if you want. Again, you can assign this. You can see I have this assigned to something on my keyboard here, so I can change it. You can, if you want to get fancy with a track and you want a certain thing to be in a certain area, you can automate that. So just going down the list of articulations, we have our legato, which we just heard. You have vibrato control. Now, this is going to be your go-to for non-vibrato, as well as you'll see on this second page, we can control kind of our user-controlled vibrato. So starting with non-vibrato, which you get this really icy sound. And I didn't do it because I put it on. So I'll come back to this. I'll tell you that in a second. But anyway. So again, same deal. You got all the articulations. If you want to control the vibrato, you've got some speed and depth here, which I would just set. And then you can learn your amount. I've got it on this knob here. So if we wanted to play. So if you want to control the vibrato, you can there. Sustains. I tend to leave this on poly, so I guess we'll talk about this. So on the advanced page, you've got some switches here for all the articulations, for most of the articulations. You've got latch, which means it's latched. So if this is off, let's say you're going along and you want a sustain and you play 1, and the next note will go back to the last latched key switch. But if you leave it on latch, it'll just stay there until you do want to move on. I tend to leave this on poly. If you're one of those people you like to play kind of parts in and kind of play you could have just a polyphonic sustains. There's no legato or anything there. Then détaché. So this is every note has a new bow. It's like a bow change on every note, as opposed to the bow restarts on every note. Marcato is so this is a nice one. Often I'll leave this on off latch as well. I might just want to hit one marcato. You know, you can be playing a string of so hit one marcato and then it goes back. Portato. So now that we're getting into sort of the short notes, these are ones that start to vary a lot when we get to smart delay. In real time, portato. Oh, I have it on not latched as well. So latching that, we can hear a bunch of portatos in a row. So it's kind of a really extended, lengthened note. Literally, it means the bow goes several times in the same direction. It has like these little, almost hills. In Smart Delay, there's lots more options note length wise, but we'll keep moving. We'll come back to those in Smart Delay. Staccato. So again, just a touch shorter than portato in this. The way we're talking about these articulations, there's basically staccato means it's an on the string articulation, which means they start with the bow on the string and they end with the bow on the string. So you have this real defined beginning, the bow is moving, and then the bow slows down and stops. Contrast that with spiccato, which means the bow is off the string, it leaves the string. So it has this very kind of open sound and much less clear length, right? The staccatos have a really clear, and you'll hear in Smart Delay there's several more lengths of notes that are really useful. Spiccatos vary a lot. They vary less. That's in a lot of other violins, what they would call staccato often sounds like that, but this is more of a true spiccato. Now sautille is it's another level. So a little bit tighter. This is really great for repeated notes. It's kind of a real bouncing bow. The bow is bouncing a lot. So sautille is just a hair. It's just a little tighter than spiccato. And again, all of these, lots more options even than just this when we get to Smart Delay. Now ricochet, if we think about, if I go back to staccato, really kind of purposeful and long. Spiccato, still some defined length, but not so much. And then sautille is really bouncy. Ricochet is truly the bouncing bow. This is a lot of times they'll have this articulation that'll just go kind of this bouncing thing. But we were sampled someone playing a bunch of them, so you have tons of round robins, You can also do these kind of, if I put it in open strings, you can kind of get these. Really bouncy. So lots of short note options and even more once we get to Smart Delay. Then your classic pizzicato. Kind of like leaving it in the open string. It was a good example of the different timbres. So if we hear this, a very open kind of sound, and then we could go here. So lots of options, obviously lots of round robins. I usually leave this one on polyphonic. So here you have polyphonic set. So we'll leave that there. So you got pizzicatos, and then we've got tremolo. Again, I usually leave this on polyphonic. So that's tremolos, and that's all, dynamics. Now we come to harmonics. Now, if you'll notice when you hit harmonics, the key switch options change because these notes are not possible in when you're playing harmonics, and everything is mapped up an octave. So we listen to, and then we go to harmonics. So you got your open G, you get a fifth above it, and then you got chromatic from there. So you got harmonics there. Okay, now portamentos. These are your, your more truer portamento. A real long. Let's listen to a couple. Let's see. Oops, hit the wrong key switch. So that really milky kind of thing, and you'll notice they stay on the same string. You can also do cool things where you can do a portamento to any other articulation. So let's say I want to go, all you have to do is press, let's say, staccato and then portamento. So you could go kind of like this. So I'm playing, and then I want a staccato portamento, and you have a nice slide to I really like this portato. So I'll go legato, portato, then portamento. You have this nice landing into this really soft, kind of pillowy note. So you got portamentos there. Again, don't forget you have your expressive shifts. So you've got that, and then you've got portamentos on top of that. More to talk about in Smart Delay with that, and then performance trills and performance runs are really they're more Smart Delay specific. And you'll even notice that when you were playing in so it's like tracking your speed, and when you play fast it'll do performance runs. Even in real time, it'll do that. In Smart Delay, it gets a little more intense. So then, just some deep features. We talked about the poly and the latch stuff here. You've got your releases. So if we listen to let's turn the reverb off. If I turn it all the way down, you can hear there's no release. But if I turn it up, so I'll leave it around 1 o'clock. Then you got your resonance volume. So resonance is just other strings ringing. So for example, if I play this D, you hear the D string ringing. Nothing. So that's a little thing. It adds a little bit of realism. And then running trills, tuning variations. So this basically, when you're playing really fast notes, the higher up this is, the more out of tune, kind of random out of tuneness it'll add. If you leave it all the way down, it plays everything perfectly in tune. We've got our 2 microphone mixer. So this library has 103,000 samples. So we actually ran out of room in Contact. Originally, we were going to have all the mics in here, but we've got the other mics in other instruments. So maybe I'll just pull those up real quick and we can just hear just a little bit of the sound, the difference. So we have the ribbon mic, we have a condenser mic, and we have the vintage mic. And they both have the room in there with it. We'll listen to the room mic. You can get an idea of how that sounds. So, so this one is quite a bit brighter. And then we have the vintage. So this is an old ribbon mic. So much smaller, kind of darker sound. And then we'll check out the room mic. And they all have the room mic, and so it's actually really nice with just the reverb in the room. You can really play it. It's in a studio, very studio sound. So again, this was recorded thinking about that kind of solo violin, the kind of soloist out front. So you're having more of a close mic. I mean, it's not really close, but more of that studio recorded kind of closer mic, not in a big orchestra, you know, with like tree mics or anything. It's not really the vibe. So we have a reverb here that's just to kind of give it. So then we already talked about the vibrato controls, and that's pretty much it for real time. So let's talk about smart delay for a second. So smart delay is our sample playback technology that allows the DAW to look ahead to subsequent notes, to analyze the entire context that any particular note is played in, and choose the correct sample from this huge matrix of recordings we talked about earlier. This goes far beyond simple articulation switching or legato speed, although those are included. So you might be asking, like, what does smart delay do for us? So it does a few things. Number one, it's doing that automatic key switching. I think you could see in some of the earlier examples when smart delay is going, it's automatically choosing different staccato and spiccato notes. It's automatically switching to runs when you're playing runs, and not just in the standard kind of way, which other sample libraries, they basically guess if you're playing a run based on the previous note. But smart delay can actually look ahead to see how long the note you actually play is. So smart delay is doing a lot of heavy lifting, switching articulations, so you don't have to constantly be changing articulations as much. The next thing is the air before the notes. So it's pretty common wisdom now that you want to get that air, the little bit of milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds before every sample, because if you don't have it, it loses kind of the realism, and there's all this little nuance that happens right before the note sounds. So obviously we're capturing all that stuff, but the beauty of smart delay is that since it's actually looking forward, it can start playing the note early, play that little bit of air before the MIDI note actually happens, and then execute the note on the right time. You don't have to mess with your DAW delay compensation or go through the manual and figure out what the milliseconds are. It's automatically figured out for every articulation in the library. Another big thing we use smart delay for is accommodating for all kinds of different note lengths. So in a standard sample library, they're just recording all the notes long. They have to record sustains to be as long as you might hold it, because they have no idea how long you're going to hold the note, right? So we realize that there's so much nuance in the way a player moves from one note to the next. So if they play a quarter note into a half note, they're doing all kinds of things to the timbre, the pitch, the dynamics, and that moving from that note to the next note is so much of what gives that expression that we all love when we hear great players. So when we have the players record, they're playing all these phrases with all these different note lengths. And because we can extract them, smart delay can look and see how long the note is you're playing and go grab that correct note length. And I'll give you some examples in a minute. So the note lengths is a huge thing. We have 5 note lengths for all the samples, and so that's everything. If you think about something like the Sautier short notes, there's like 5 round robins of those times 4 different note lengths. So it's kind of like having 20 round robin of varying note lengths that adjust based on how quickly you play them on your keyboard or how long you play them. Then we have the legato transitions. So standard sample libraries, you have a legato transition from one note to the next. You know, you play a note, it does the math between those 2 notes and puts a little sound in. But because we can see the whole phrase, and because we're choosing notes based on not just the previous note but the next note, every note in smart delay it has a note into it and a note out of it. So it's a transition in a certain note length and then a transition out. And I'll demonstrate that. But so you have all these variations of subtle ways that someone might move from one note to another. And then there's real practical ones like portamentos, which I'll show you. Portamentos is a classic one that's super annoying to program in a standard sample library. In Smart Delay, it basically solves having to nudge MIDI notes around. So let's just take a quick look at a few examples of how Smart Delay benefits us and how you might use it in your workflow. Okay, so let's take a closer look at how to use Smart Delay and some of the benefits that we get. If we look here at your list of instruments, you have the 3 microphone positions, and then you have the same 3 again with the 4, it says 4 beat here. So basically the difference is these use the plugin, these first 3 use the plugin where there's no moving anything around. You just put the plugin on and it syncs everything up. This is delays everything by 4 beats, which was the original way Smart Delay worked. So from Birth of the Trumpet, you had to move everything back 4 beats. So if you're using Bel Canto along with some of our other stuff, this might come in handy. Also, we still don't have an as of the making of this video, we still don't have an AAX version of the plugin. So if you're in Pro Tools, you can still use it, but you've got to delay stuff by 4 beats. So we've got just the regular ribbon here. So once you load it up into Contact, and so here's my channel with Contact. Let's call this Bel Canto. You'll need the plugin, and so in mine it's under here. It says straight ahead samples. If you've downloaded our non-Smart Delay track sync, that's something else, but this is called Smart Delay Offset, and it loads up this little window. Doesn't do anything. I mean, it does a lot, but there's no buttons or anything. So you can pretty much leave this on all the time. The only time really you need to turn it off is if you're punching back in on something, because it will delay. It'll make in real time come early. So generally we say best practice is to just stay in real time until you're pretty much at the end, or at least until you've played in all the parts, and then switch it over to Smart Delay. So once you got the plugin, you play your phrase in. So let me give you an example of, I'll just play a phrase in. So the first benefit that we talked about is going to be the automatic key switching. So this is a fun and kind of really transformative experience of Smart Delay where you don't have to put in nearly as many key switches as you normally would. So you'll see me play a phrase in with some long notes, some short notes. We'll talk about the legato and all the interesting stuff that's happening there, but just pay attention to when we hear Smart Delay playback, how you can see it in the window. It's kind of jumping around and playing some sautier, some staccato, maybe some spiccato in there, playing some runs. No key switches at all, and it's transforming the performance pretty significantly. So let's check that out. Okay, so I think you can hear it's pretty amazing transformation there. The next thing to look at is just the air before the note and how we're compensating for that. So, like I said, sample libraries are generally all on board with capturing that air before the sound. Sometimes people they'll have to set some kind of delay here to compensate for different. They'll have 150 milliseconds on short notes or something on the legato, but the Smart Delay compensation takes care of all that. Let's play in just some short notes. I think these staccatos will give us something interesting to look at. So I'm just going to play a row of staccatos in real time, and then we're going to bounce it and kind of look at the air that's coming before the note and how it's perfectly synced up and compensated for. So I'm just going to play kind of on strong beats. Okay, so just a nice little, played the wrong key switch first. Okay, so that was real time. So now we're in smart delay, and we'll watch it play back, and it's going to be, I'll put these perfectly on the grid. And you can see there, if I started here in Logic, every DAW deals with it slightly differently. But the way Logic does it, it jumps back. Sometimes it'll look like the cursor will just freeze after you press play, because it's like when you've got a compressor on. It does the same thing with heavy plugins. If you get a project that has a ton of plugins on it, you press play and there's a delay. It's that exact same idea. It's compensating for the delay that the plugin is adding. So if you watch, Logic's gonna like jump back. Cool. So we had some more different notes, gave us different length things. Pretty cool. Let's actually turn the reverb off so we can see let me just bounce this, and then we'll be able to look at the audio and kind of see what it's doing here. So that one's pretty subtle, but you can see that, like, so here's exactly where the MIDI note starts, and you can see there's some sound before the note, right? So we're kind of getting into the bow again on this one. So this is subtle here, but the point is that the note is starting before the MIDI note. The MIDI note happens, right? So we can account for any kind of delay. Obviously, this gets more extreme when we talk about portamentos and things like that. So let's talk about that. So if I play let's just play two notes in legato, and then we're going to add a portamento to it. And this is kind of the real classic example of kind of annoying MIDI production stuff. Okay, so I'll turn smart delay back off, go back to real time. Okay, so let's just play two long notes, and then let's see what we'll... Okay, so we just got octave E's. Now let's add, I'll put my slurred legato. This is our basic legato key switch, and then we'll put our portamento key switch, which is the C sharp right here. And let's listen to what happens. No smart delay, just in real time. This is a way a regular every other sample library works. So very nice. Stretch that out. But you heard, we hear the first note, and then when this note, you've got the key switch here, when this note is played, it starts doing the slide. But we want the slide to arrive here. So we've all been here where we have to, okay, move this. I'm going to nudge this over till I can, still not enough. Let me move it a little more so it lands on the downbeat. Okay, that's pretty close. Hard to tell. But in smart delay, what's amazing, and which is great, so we're just going to turn our smart delay on and our plugin on. And again, I'm only really turning this on and off because I'm showing you real time, So what's going to happen is smart delay can look ahead. So, the reason that every other sample library that doesn't have smart delay can't play the portamento early is because it literally doesn't know that it's coming, right? It has no idea that you're about to play this note. But smart delay can look ahead and see, oh, this note is coming, and they've hit the key switch. So I need, instead of starting the slide here, I need to start the slide way back here so it arrives perfectly on time. And I'll even leave the key switch in the same spot. So we're actually going to hear, in smart delay, we're going to hear this first note, and then we're going to hear the gliss start not only before the note, but before we even hit the key switch, because it's looking ahead to see. And so you'll hear that the slide will land perfectly on the next downbeat. So here we go, portamento in smart delay. So there you go. So you heard it started here, ended here, right? We got to the E where we wanted it. So that's kind of an extreme version of the air before the note, right? Not really air, but the lead into the note. Again, so you're playing, you've played a part in and you think, oh, that would be so nice to have a little portamento between those two notes. You don't have to nudge this around and find the landing spot. You just put the key switch. It's in Smart Delay. It can look ahead and put it exactly where you want it. Okay, so now let's look at note lengths. So, and this kind of goes in hand with the intervals of each interval in and out. Right, so in a traditional sample library, basically every sample has to be, for long samples anyway, they have to be as long as possible because they have no idea how long you're going to hold it. Right? There has to be enough sound there. You can't do like a little short, tiny sustain. So because of that, the player that's recording the instrument that they're sampling has to play every note really long. Now, the reality is the way a person plays a short note, even if it's legato, a shorter legato note than a longer legato note is very different. And so when you have someone play a phrase where they're going doo-dee, 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 dee, they're playing legato, long notes, but for not a long amount of time, each note is fairly short, they play it very differently than if they were to play this very excuse my singing, if they were to play this very long, drawn out notes. The timbre, there's like a shape to the note over time, even the pitch, the vibrato, all those things change. So in order to capture all that, you have to have people playing different note lengths. So legato notes that are shorter, legato notes that are longer. And again, in our library, we have 5 lengths for longs. And for short notes, we have 4 lengths. But of course, short notes have a lot more round robins. So let's just play a phrase and listen to the different sounds when it's played in a faster phrase and a slower phrase. So if I play, all right, let's see. Just something nice and simple. Okay, so if I put this in Smart Delay, now I know exactly where all the tempo, like the speed breaks are, like how long notes are. It doesn't really matter. You don't really have to know where the breaks are as far as like when is it going to play this sample and versus, that's all happening in the background. But let's just listen to this playback. Maybe less pre-roll. Nice. So we heard these are all recordings from notes that were around this length, right? So it's basically saying, okay, this note is however many milliseconds this is. 110, a quarter note at 110. I'm not that good at math. But anyway, however long many milliseconds it is, it measures it. It can, before it starts playing it, remember, before it starts playing the note, it looks and sees how long the note is and goes and grabs the right note length sample. And it grabs one with the interval and stuff. So we'll talk about that in a second. So it's grabbing notes that are close to however long these are. Nice little slide there. Shift, expressive shift, really. So the easiest way to play different lengths of notes is just to speed it up and slow it down, so I don't have to keep playing things in. So that's one. Let's go faster. So I think it's probably around here. Yeah, you can hear different samples. We could even bounce each of these to show that they're not the same sample. But you can hear that it just has the vibrato slightly different. It has a slightly different attack from note to note. Let's go real fast. And I think this will be the fastest one we have. Other than runs, which is another one we could. Yeah, let's turn the click off. You can hear the shift was really quick and kind of almost imperceptible. No vibrato. So that's not just the same samples cut off. That's a different set of samples. Let's go slower. This should get us another length. Yeah, so you can hear the vibrato started sooner, right? So the player was playing slower, and they had more time to put vibrato on every note. They're playing faster, they have less time, right? They're moving from note to note. And then we have the slowest one, which is based. This one goes to the sustains. So then we're hearing. So now we're hearing sustains, right? So so those are all. So basically, it's measuring each note, it's looking ahead before it plays a note, measuring how long it is, and going to find the closest length sample we have to that. While we're here, in addition to that, let's talk about legato transitions. So we also have, in the traditional sample library, you have a legato transition basically between two notes. You play one note, you play another note, it figures out the little sound between the two notes and sticks it in between. Or you, in a slightly better way, maybe you have a sample, this second sample that has a little, like this, it has a little thing on it, ring, and then it goes to a sustain, right? We've already talked about how every note being a sustain isn't the best, but so you've got a legato transition in, but because ours can look ahead, because Smart Delay can look ahead, we have a legato transition in and out. So for example, this note right here, this middle note is a good example. Actually, they all are, but this middle note is a sample. It's not just a sustain that's this length. It's a sustain that comes from a step up and ends with a step down. If we were to go find in the back end of Contact and find this sample that it's playing, it has a little, it's coming from a note. It's basically coming from exactly this situation. A D to an E, back to a D, right? So example, if this note went like that, it would play a different sample. Because, well, yeah, you heard a slide there instead, right? So it played a different, the body of this sample is different if I change this note. Let's see if we can really hear it. You can hear that it's not the same sample. So legato transitions in and out of every note. Another important thing is where it is in the phrase. Like the first note and the last note are different, right? They have the way a note starts when it starts from nothing, especially if you think about a violin. The bow is not moving, and then the bow starts moving, right? So this first note has a very different sound than this note. Not just legato, it's that the bow, when we're doing legato here, the bow is still moving, right? So that's totally different. But this note, starts from nothing. And similarly, the ending notes they end very different. Let's just listen to that last and listen to the tail of it. Right? It has a taper to it. Right? These notes don't have a taper. And even if we go back up to like where we were, check out. Right, that was really good when you could hear the ring as they let go of this G sharp. Right? So where it is in the phrase, if it's in the middle of the phrase, there's a whole different set of samples. If it's the first note, if it's the last note, and then intervals in and out of every note. It's kind of hard to imagine, but just the realization that if I change this note, it changes this. We talked a little bit about the string crossing legato. So this is an example of where, let's do this. So this note will be, pretty sure this will cross. So if we watch it here, it should play these two on the D string, and it'll play this on the A string. Right. So this note is going to, there's a funny thing that happens when a violinist moves from being on a string to the next string, right? They move over. The bow just lifts off the string while it's still moving. And then this note, the bow is put onto the string while it's still moving, which is a pretty different sound to starting the bow from nothing. So this is a totally different set of samples, a true string crossing, where this is a different set. This is a note that goes to a new string, and this is a note that comes from a new string. So like a traditional legato transition, this is a part of the reason why we sampled every string individually. A traditional legato transition between this note and this note isn't of much use because that's not the way it actually sounds. There isn't a little connective tissue between those. They do connect in a way because there's actually a moment where the bow is on both strings. So there's actually slightly more of an overlap. The bow is on the D string and the A string for a few milliseconds, right? It's on both. All that stuff is being accounted for. So the string crossings, obviously the intervals in and out, slurring in and out, up and down, shifting up and down. So when you change any note, that's another good example. Like repeated notes are very difficult to do. So like because the bow, it's basically a bow change, an automatic bow change. When they repeat a note, the bow has to go in the other direction. So you can hear this note starts to taper because it's about to rebow this note. And you can hear the taper comes at the end of this note, right? So the taper is preempting this because it can look ahead and know that this note is a repeated note, so now this note needs to be going to a bow change. Things like that. It's kind of complicated, but that's basically the idea. So just knowing that, like, if you change this note, it changes this sample, right? Because it's looking, where is it coming from? Where is it going to every time? Okay, that was kind of long-winded, but I think you get it. Okay, so another example would be for note length variations would be like short notes. So let's shorten these and go to staccato. Staccato has the biggest difference between the different note lengths. We talked a little bit about this, but the reason is this is an on the string articulations, which means the bow starts on the string and ends on the string. So it has a real defined ending. So if you imagine the bow starts and then the bow stops on the string, right? So they didn't have a more defined length than, say, spiccato. Spiccato, they kind of just fly off the string and it makes a generic kind of short note. So let's just check it out and see. Maybe I'll give them a little more room so we can really hear. Okay, so let's hear that again. Okay, so that's one set of samples, right? And you can see they're pretty much exactly this length. So that's not cutting a note off. It's not taking a sample and chopping it. That is a performance that's about that length. And then if we go up to probably around here, it'll play something shorter. Yes, so you heard that. So no key switch changes. It's just, and I'm changing the tempo because it's an easy way to make the note shorter. Like this is now some milliseconds shorter than it was because we've increased the tempo. But you know, if you were to just take them all and do that, it would do the same thing. It would play a new set of samples. But I'm just changing the tempo for speed. Right? So that's another length. You can still hear it has a kind of defined length still. It has D. It's not just a super short. Now, I think we have one more set up. Yeah. That was different. You hear that? A little slower, a little longer. Right? Slightly different. I think there's a lower one too. So like somewhere around here. So now these are, I'm slowed it way down. So now these are longer samples. Right? So again, not taking a sustain and cutting it off, actually going and getting different samples based on the length. So if you were to, play one like this and one like this and one kind of in the middle, So key switch isn't changing. It's just going and finding the closest length note to the one you played. So for portatos is another one that basically from portato through sautier, portato, staccato, spiccato, sautier, those all have 4 note lengths. And then they each have their own number of round robins. Portato has 3 round robins. Staccato has 4. But if you imagine it's 4, basically times 4, right? So it's kind of like 16 round robins in a way, because you have all these different, when you just perform it in, you're going to have variances in how long you're playing the notes. Spiccato has 5 round robins times 4 length. And spiccato is not that different. Like, they're all kind of similar. If we go to spiccato, right, it's leaning way shorter, right? So it doesn't have that same. Now, if I was to just turn this key switch off, and just go back to like slurred legato, it's gonna choose staccato there, right? So if you want to just let it do it for you, it can do it. So again, let's see what it does. So it did staccato there, then spiccato, right? So it's looking and it's going to say, okay, that one's closer to a staccato, gets the staccato. That one's closer to a spiccato, gets the spiccato. So if you want to just let the script do it, you can just leave it on the first key switch and it'll do. But if you want to get a little more particular with the note length, you can still put the key switch in. You'll get a few more options that are just specific to, let's say, sautier. Okay, so that's note lengths. The last kind of one we could talk about is just kind of the performance runs. That's kind of another level of note lengths, where when you play really fast notes, I left smart delay on inadvertently, but probably should still work. I like this key switch that makes them short. So you just have a long note with some fast notes in between. It's going to go and get really short legato samples that are literally played when someone was playing a run. Smart delay. Right? So it's not just like a speed control, like crossfade thing. It's actually going and getting run samples from when someone was playing a run. And trills work the same way. So that's a quick crash course in the benefits of smart delay. And so a lot less key switching, tons more options for note lengths. You're going to hear appropriately different performances when you're playing faster legato phrases and slower legato phrases that are actually using different samples, not just, cutting samples shorter, but actually going and getting, a sample from when someone was, our soloist who recorded this, was playing a faster tempo, was playing faster legato notes. So just, a lot more realism, a lot more, appropriate variation between playing slow and fast. Tons of short note options for runs, for short notes, for any kind of legato playing. You almost need no key switches for that stuff. And you'll see that, in some of these demos, that there's just big long stretches with no key switches. Unless you want a more marcato, or you want pizzicato or tremolo. If you don't need that, you can pretty much go for a long spell without it, and you're getting so much stuff. So many variations of notes. Thanks for watching. Click the link in the description to hear more demos and see more videos with Bel Canto Violin. If you like our smart delay, check out this other video that shows smart delay in action. Thanks so much.